The prison gates closed behind him with a sound that seemed louder than it should have been. He felt the weight of the walls pressing in, the gray buildings stretching endlessly in every direction. Every step he took echoed on the concrete floor as if the whole place was waiting to see him stumble. He had heard the stories before coming here, the warnings about who controlled what, who could make life unbearable, and who survived by staying quiet. He kept his eyes low and his shoulders squared, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing him nervous. As he walked through the intake area, guards barked orders that made the newcomers jump. The other prisoners watched silently from the sidelines, some whispering to each other, some laughing at small jokes that only made sense in the prison world. He felt the stares of the older, hardened inmates, those who had been here for years and knew every trick, every angle. He said nothing, simply nodded when required, and followed the path that led to the housing block. Inside the block, the smell was strong and hard to ignore: food, sweat, and something sour that made him flinch slightly. He was shown to a small cell, barely enough room to stretch out, with a thin mattress on a metal frame. He dropped his bag and sat for a moment, letting his eyes scan every corner. He knew he would have to understand this place quickly if he wanted to survive. Prison life was not forgiving, and anyone who hesitated was at a disadvantage. He noticed the other inmates as they moved through the block. Some walked with purpose, heads held high, daring anyone to challenge them. Others slunk along the walls, trying to avoid attention. And then there was the bully, a tall, broad man with a presence that filled the hallways. His laugh was loud, and his gaze swept over the new inmates like a predator sizing up its prey. He had a way of making people feel small without even touching them. The first day passed in a blur of introductions, rules, and warnings. He learned where the bathrooms were, where to line up for meals, and where to avoid if he wanted to stay out of trouble. Every interaction was a test, every glance a measurement of strength. By the evening, he felt the tension in his shoulders and the tightness in his chest. He knew he would have to be patient, watchful, and strategic. When it was time for dinner, he carried his tray carefully and found an empty table. He preferred to eat alone, keeping to himself and avoiding any early conflicts. Other inmates cast glances his way, curious about the quiet man who did not seek attention. He set his tray down, looking at the simple food in front of him, and took a deep breath. This was just the first day, and already he could feel the eyes on him. The bully soon noticed him. With a smirk, he walked over and leaned against the table, his presence commanding attention. "New guy, huh?" he said loudly, making sure everyone around could hear. "Think you can handle this place?" He met the bully's eyes calmly, refusing to show fear. "Just here to eat," he replied simply. The words were few, but the calm in his voice hinted at confidence. The bully laughed, a deep mocking sound, and walked away, shaking his head. He could feel the tension lingering like a storm that had not yet arrived. The next days were a test of endurance. He observed the routines, listened to the whispers, and noted the alliances forming between inmates. Some offered small smiles, a nod of recognition, while others gave subtle warnings with a look or a gesture. He paid attention to every detail, storing them in his mind for later. His military training had taught him discipline, observation, and patience. Every movement, every reaction mattered. He had to understand the environment before making any decisive actions. It wasn't long before the bully's antics escalated. During one meal, he deliberately knocked over a tray of food near him, causing a loud clatter. The other inmates laughed, expecting a reaction. He simply looked down at his untouched meal, keeping his composure. The bully smirked, thinking he had intimidated him, but he remained unshaken. This quiet resistance was unusual in the block, and some inmates began to notice. Over time, he developed a rhythm. He ate his meals alone, kept his head down in the yard, and maintained a careful awareness of his surroundings. He learned which inmates were trustworthy, who to avoid, and who would respect him if he showed restraint. There was a strange sense of satisfaction in being able to move through the tense environment without giving anyone an opening. He also spent moments reflecting on his life before prison, the training he had endured, and the discipline that had become second nature. Those years as a Marine had shaped him in ways that few could understand. He had faced challenges that demanded focus, precision, and control. He drew strength from those memories, knowing that his training gave him an edge that no one here would expect. The bully, growing impatient with the quiet defiance, began to escalate. One day he approached the table where he sat eating and poured water directly onto the tray of food. The liquid spread across the table, soaking the simple meal. Laughter erupted around him, the sound harsh and cruel in the enclosed space. The bully stood back, chest out, clearly enjoying the humiliation he had caused. He remained calm, wiping the water away without a word. His eyes met the bully's, steady and unflinching. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the reaction. The bully had expected anger, perhaps a fight, but all he saw was composure and a quiet, measured strength. That calm was more unsettling than any display of force. As the bully walked away, the whispers began. Inmates were curious, some impressed, some uncertain about what they had just witnessed. He ate the remainder of his meal quietly, unaffected by the laughter or the stares. Inside, he was already planning, calculating how he would respond in a way that maintained his dignity and sent a clear message without unnecessary chaos. By the end of the week, he had learned enough to navigate the initial dangers of prison life. He had earned a cautious respect, simply by observing, staying calm, and showing that he could not be easily provoked. He knew that this was only the beginning, that the real challenges were yet to come, but he also knew that he had the skills, the discipline, and the patience to face whatever lay ahead. In the quiet of his cell that night, he reflected on the balance between restraint and strength. He understood the rules of the environment, the subtle power plays, and the importance of timing. Every move had to be deliberate, every reaction measured. His Marine training had taught him that victory often came not from immediate action, but from careful observation and strategy. He felt a calm confidence settle over him, a certainty that he would survive and thrive even in this harsh place. As he lay on the thin mattress, he could hear the distant sounds of the prison, footsteps, doors clanging, and the occasional shout. It was a world full of tension and challenge, but he felt ready. He had entered as a lone figure, uncertain and cautious, but he would not remain unnoticed for long. Strength, discipline, and patience were his allies, and he would use them to navigate the dangers ahead. This was just the beginning of a journey where survival would depend on more than brute force. It would depend on strategy, courage, and the quiet confidence of a trained Marine in a world that underestimated him. After the water incident, the atmosphere in the block shifted slightly. Whispers followed him wherever he went, and the other inmates began to notice the quiet confidence he carried. He still kept to himself, moving carefully through the hallways, avoiding eye contact with anyone who looked for trouble. But he had also started paying closer attention to the bully, noting the man's patterns, the way he interacted with others, and the weaknesses in his behavior. The bully had grown bold, thinking that the water incident was enough to establish dominance. He made little remarks, threw food at him when the guards weren't looking, and laughed at any attempt to intimidate. Yet every action he took was met with calm, controlled responses. The black inmate never raised his voice, never overreacted, and never made a move that could be seen as desperation or fear. This made the bully more frustrated than ever. He began to form small connections with other inmates. These were subtle gestures, a nod, a small conversation, a shared joke in the yard. He didn't force relationships, but he understood the value of alliances. Some inmates were naturally drawn to his calm strength, while others watched from a distance, unsure if he was to be feared or respected. In these quiet interactions, he gained small pieces of valuable information about the block, learning which areas were dangerous, which inmates could be trusted, and where the guards paid less attention. At night, when the block was quieter, he spent time reflecting on strategy. His Marine training had ingrained a sense of observation and patience. He knew the importance of choosing the right moment, of not letting emotions dictate actions. He watched the bully's routines, noting when he was most confident, when he laughed the loudest, and when he left his defenses low. These observations were pieces of a larger puzzle, a puzzle he intended to solve before taking any action. One afternoon in the yard, the bully tried to provoke him again. He shoved a smaller inmate into the wall and then glanced at him, expecting a reaction. He simply watched, stepping aside if necessary, but never intervening directly. He understood that timing was crucial. The right response would be powerful, but a premature reaction could backfire. He allowed the bully to show his arrogance fully, letting the behavior play out in front of witnesses. He also started noticing subtle signs from other inmates. Some looked at the bully with annoyance, some with fear, and some with hope that someone might finally challenge him. The black inmate realized that influence in this environment was as much about perception as it was about strength. If he could act wisely, he could shift the balance of power without unnecessary risk. During meals, he continued to sit alone, carefully observing the interactions around him. The bully often tried to distract him, throwing food or making comments, but he maintained composure. Occasionally, he caught the eyes of other inmates who silently approved of his restraint. This quiet attention built an invisible support network, small but significant, that he could rely on when the time came. In the following days, the bully's behavior escalated further. He pushed and shoved, made threats, and tried to intimidate everyone who seemed too quiet or too strong. Yet, the black inmate never lost control. He used mental exercises to stay focused, reviewing potential scenarios and outcomes. His mind became a battlefield where strategy outweighed impulse and discipline guided every choice. He also began to plan how he might respond if direct confrontation became unavoidable. This wasn't about seeking revenge. It was about establishing boundaries, protecting himself, and earning respect. He envisioned every possible angle: the location, the timing, the witnesses, and the potential consequences. His goal was not chaos, but precision, a decisive action that would make it clear that he could not be underestimated. While the bully believed he was untouchable, cracks began to show in his confidence. Other inmates noticed the lack of reaction from the black inmate and began to question the bully's strength. Some small groups started to whisper among themselves, wondering if the quiet newcomer might be someone to watch. Rumors in prison moved fast, and soon the idea that the black inmate was not to be trifled with began to spread quietly. He also practiced patience with himself. He knew that a single mistake could ruin everything. He reminded himself of his Marine training, of the countless hours spent learning control, observation, and strategy. Every day, every interaction, and every glance became data he could use later. He learned to read body language, tone, and intention with greater accuracy. He became a silent force, unseen but always present, like a calm storm waiting to strike. In the yard, he occasionally helped weaker inmates without drawing attention. A subtle gesture, a hand steadying someone who stumbled, a protective stance in a tense moment. These small actions earned him quiet respect. Others began to see him as more than just a new inmate. They recognized discipline, intelligence, and controlled strength, qualities that could change the dynamics of the block. One afternoon, he noticed the bully planning a new act of humiliation. He would throw water or food, perhaps even try to isolate him in a hallway, but this time he had already prepared mentally. He observed, calculated distance, noted potential witnesses, and imagined the exact response that would assert his position without creating chaos. Everything was in place. He had the timing, the understanding, and the focus to act effectively. The moments before the confrontation were quiet but tense. The bully approached with his usual arrogance, unaware that his actions were fully anticipated. The black inmate's calm presence was unsettling to some nearby inmates who sensed that something significant was about to happen. He didn't speak, didn't gesture, simply observed, waiting for the right moment to assert himself. The tension in the room was palpable, a mix of fear, curiosity, and anticipation. In these days, he learned more than just the bully's behavior. He learned the power of observation, patience, and subtle influence. He understood how fear could be both a weapon and a weakness, how restraint could be more powerful than aggression, and how respect was earned quietly but remembered loudly. Every step, every meal, every glance became part of a larger plan that he controlled completely. He also kept in mind the people who underestimated him. Some thought his calmness was weakness. Others thought his silence was fear. He knew that perception was everything in this environment. If he could act decisively at the right moment, he would not only protect himself, but also establish a reputation that no bully could ignore. By the end of this part of his journey, he had transformed the quiet, careful observation into an invisible shield. He moved through the block with a sense of purpose, unshaken by provocations and increasingly respected by those who valued strength with control. The bully continued to act out, but the black inmate's composed presence became a silent reminder that the dynamics of the block were changing. He lay in his cell at night, reviewing every interaction of the day, refining his strategy, and preparing mentally for what was to come. He knew that confrontation would eventually happen, but it had to be on his terms. The patience he cultivated, the careful observation, and the respect he quietly earned would all play a part in the decisive moment. In his mind, every detail was accounted for, every variable considered, and every step toward eventual resolution was deliberate and precise. The days blended into a rhythm of careful observation, subtle alliances, and quiet strength. He had survived the initial tests, established a sense of presence, and earned the beginnings of respect without unnecessary violence. The bully remained a challenge, but the balance of power was shifting subtly, and the black inmate's confidence grew with each passing day. He understood that strength alone would not win this battle. It was discipline, strategy, and the calm certainty of someone who had faced greater challenges before and survived. The day had begun like any other, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. Inmates moved about with cautious glances, sensing that the quiet newcomer was no longer just observing. The black inmate had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying every detail, every behavior of the bully, and now he felt ready. His mental preparation, combined with his marine discipline, gave him the confidence that the outcome would be precise and controlled. The bully, as usual, was loud and overconfident, striding through the block as if he owned it. He was unaware that his actions had been catalogued, his routines memorized, and his weaknesses fully understood. He threw small insults at others, laughed at minor provocations, and glanced in the black inmate's direction, expecting the usual quiet submission. But this time, there would be no submission. As the bully approached the mess hall, he noticed the black inmate sitting at his usual table, calm and composed. The table was empty except for his meal untouched, and his posture radiated readiness. The bully smirked, expecting an easy opportunity to assert dominance. He moved closer, thinking this confrontation would be just another display of his power. The black inmate remained still, his eyes steady and unflinching. He allowed the bully to make the first move, letting him reveal exactly how arrogant and careless he had become. The other inmates sensed that something significant was about to happen and subtly positioned themselves to observe. The energy in the room shifted. Whispers spread quietly, and even the guards seemed unaware of the brewing tension. The bully tried to provoke him verbally first. "Still sitting here alone? What, scared to be with the others?" he said loudly, laughing. The room echoed with the sound, expecting the usual reaction. But the black inmate only looked up briefly. His calm gaze meeting the bully's, no fear, no anger, only a quiet confidence that made the bully pause for a moment, just enough to notice he might be underestimated. The bully, frustrated by the lack of response, escalated. He reached over the table and shoved it slightly, trying to make a point. Laughter erupted around them, but this time it was different. The other inmates noticed the deliberate control in the black inmate's movements, the poised readiness that seemed to say he was in complete command. Then, with a swift, precise movement, the black inmate acted. He did not lash out recklessly. Instead, he used a controlled motion learned through years of training. In a single fluid motion, he shifted the bully off balance, preventing a full attack while asserting dominance. The action was deliberate, not cruel, and it immediately ended the bully's confidence-driven aggression. The room fell silent. Inmates who had laughed moments before were now watching with wide eyes. The bully, shocked and unprepared, realized he had underestimated someone he thought he controlled easily. His arrogance crumbled as the black inmate stood with calm authority, showing that his strength was not just physical, but also mental and strategic. The black inmate spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I don't react to disrespect, but I do protect myself and others." The simplicity of the words, combined with the controlled force he displayed, made a clear statement. The bully's attempts to dominate were finished. The other inmates sensed the change immediately, understanding that the quiet, composed newcomer had earned his place. From that moment, the dynamics of the block shifted. The bully, humbled and cautious, no longer dared to provoke him or others openly. His loud confidence was replaced by measured restraint, as he had learned that aggression alone was not always enough. The other inmates began to see the black inmate as a figure of controlled power and reliability. The black inmate continued to maintain calmness, never gloating or escalating further. His discipline allowed him to navigate the block with authority, earning respect not through fear but through controlled strength and strategic action. The other inmates, both allies and neutrals, Notice that he did not seek conflict unnecessarily, but when necessary, he acted decisively and with precision. Over the following days, the shift became more apparent. Inmates who had previously avoided confrontation began to move with more confidence, knowing that a controlled, disciplined presence now maintained balance. The black inmate's reputation grew quietly, reinforced by the memory of his precise and measured response. Even the guards, unaware of the full background, noted a change in behavior and tension levels. The bully, humbled by the confrontation, began to observe rather than act rashly. He still maintained a presence, but the overt attempts to dominate others were gone. The black inmate's combination of patience, observation, and disciplined action had reset the hierarchy without unnecessary chaos or retaliation. The quiet force he represented became a stabilizing presence in the block. The black inmate also continued to build small alliances subtly. By helping weaker inmates discreetly and maintaining composure, he reinforced respect without creating jealousy or resentment. His actions demonstrated that strength combined with intelligence and restraint could reshape the social dynamics effectively. The block began to function differently, with fewer overt power struggles and more subtle negotiation and respect. He reflected on the confrontation and its aftermath with a sense of calm satisfaction. The outcome had been precise, strategic, and effective. He had not sought revenge, only fairness and self-protection. The lessons of patience, observation, and mental discipline had been validated, showing that controlled action often had greater impact than reckless aggression. During meals and yard time, the presence of the black inmate was now noticed in a different way. Inmates moved respectfully, some nodding subtly in acknowledgement. The bully maintained a cautious distance, aware that his previous tactics were ineffective. The balance of power had shifted decisively, and the black inmate's place was firmly established. He also continued to reflect on the importance of mental preparation. The confrontation had been successful not because of raw strength alone, but because of careful observation, strategic planning, and disciplined execution. Every element of the environment, every action of the bully, and every potential consequence had been accounted for. The outcome had reinforced the importance of patience, focus, and clear thinking. In the evenings, he maintained his routine of reflection, reviewing interactions, refining strategies for future challenges, and maintaining his mental and physical readiness. His Marine training remained a foundation, but it was his calm, disciplined approach that allowed him to apply those skills effectively in the prison environment. The quiet confidence he exhibited had become a tool of influence and respect. By the end of this part of his journey, the black inmate had transitioned from a cautious newcomer to a figure of disciplined authority. The confrontation had demonstrated his capability, earning him respect and subtly reshaping the dynamics of the block. He had shown that intelligence, patience, and controlled strength could overcome arrogance and intimidation, creating a safer and more balanced environment. He knew the journey was not over. Challenges would continue to arise and the environment would remain tense and unpredictable. But the decisive action he had taken, combined with continued observation and discipline, ensured that he was now a respected presence. The lessons of patience, strategy, and precise execution would guide him in navigating future challenges, maintaining control without unnecessary conflict, and earning respect through calm authority and measured action. After the confrontation, life in the block began to change. The black inmate's calm authority had left a lasting impression. The bully no longer tried to provoke him or others openly. He still had his presence, but the loud displays of aggression were gone. The block itself seemed quieter, as if the air had shifted. Other inmates began to move with more confidence, knowing that respect was now earned through discipline and strategy, not just intimidation. The black inmate continued his routine, maintaining the same calm composure he had always shown. He did not flaunt his victory or seek further conflicts. Instead, he focused on observing the environment, helping weaker inmates discreetly, and reinforcing the balance he had established. His actions demonstrated that true strength was a combination of skill, patience, and intelligence, not just brute force. Small acts of respect and subtle alliances became more pronounced. Inmates who had once avoided confrontation now approached him for advice or quiet guidance. They saw someone who could navigate difficult situations without unnecessary aggression, and whose presence offered a sense of security. The black inmate understood the value of these connections and continued to nurture them without seeking personal gain. The bully, now cautious, watched from a distance. He had learned a hard lesson. Loud confidence and aggression were not always enough. He respected the black inmate's discipline and strategy, understanding that his previous assumptions had been flawed. This subtle shift in the bully's behavior reinforced the new dynamics of the block, showing that respect could be established without constant confrontation. Over the following weeks, the black inmate's reputation continued to grow quietly. Inmates spoke of him in hushed tones, describing his calm strength, disciplined approach, and strategic thinking. They admired his ability to maintain control in a challenging environment, knowing when to act and when to wait. The respect he earned was based on consistent behavior, not a single act, which made it enduring. He continued to observe and refine his understanding of the block. Every interaction, every conversation, and every movement contributed to a mental map that allowed him to navigate the environment effectively. He maintained his routines, his mental exercises, and his disciplined approach to daily life. This consistency reinforced his authority and influence without creating unnecessary tension. Helping others became a subtle form of leadership. He would assist inmates who were struggling, offering guidance or support in small ways that did not draw attention. These actions earned quiet gratitude and loyalty. People began to see him as someone who balanced strength with compassion, demonstrating that leadership could be exercised without cruelty or dominance. He also took time to reflect on the lessons of patience and observation. He understood that immediate reactions often led to chaos, while calculated actions produced lasting results. His Marine training had taught him the importance of discipline, focus, and mental clarity, all of which proved invaluable in the unpredictable environment of the prison block. Each day reinforced these principles, and he applied them with careful thought. The bully, now more reserved, occasionally interacted with him without hostility. The previous tension had eased into a cautious mutual understanding. The black inmate never took advantage of this change but maintained consistent boundaries, ensuring that respect was earned and preserved. This balance of power created a more stable environment, reducing unnecessary conflict. Inmates who had once feared confrontation began to act with more confidence. They observed the black inmate's calm control and learned from his example. The environment slowly shifted from one dominated by intimidation to one influenced by measured authority and strategic thinking. This change highlighted the value of patience, observation, and intelligence in navigating complex social dynamics. Meals, yard time, and daily routines became opportunities to reinforce the balance. The black inmate continued to sit calmly, observe carefully, and act when necessary with precision. He did not seek attention, but his presence was noted and respected. Other inmates began to approach him quietly for advice or support, recognizing his ability to handle difficult situations without escalating tension. He also remained mindful of the psychological aspect of influence. He understood that respect and authority were maintained not only through action, but also through perception. By consistently demonstrating calm strength and measured responses, he reinforced his position and influence. Inmates learned to assess his presence with caution and appreciation, understanding that his actions were deliberate and intentional. In the quiet moments of his cell, he reflected on the journey. The initial isolation, the provocations, and the eventual confrontation had taught him invaluable lessons about patience, strategy, and discipline. He recognized that true power came from a combination of observation, controlled action, and intelligence. The experience reinforced his confidence and clarified the principles that guided his behavior. Over time, the black inmate became a stabilizing presence in the block. Inmates looked to him as an example of how to navigate challenges with composure and intelligence. His disciplined approach, strategic thinking, and subtle leadership created a sense of balance that had been absent before. The block operated with fewer conflicts, and the respect he earned contributed to a safer, more controlled environment. The bully, now subdued but still present, occasionally offered a cautious nod or avoided direct confrontation. The lesson had been learned and the dynamics of the block had shifted permanently. The black inmate's quiet authority ensured that the previous patterns of aggression and intimidation were replaced with a system of respect grounded in discipline and observation, helping, Weaker inmates and maintaining strategic awareness continued to be central to his daily life. He understood that influence and leadership were not about domination, but about consistent behavior, measured actions, and support for others. This approach strengthened his position and reinforced the values he had cultivated throughout his life and training. The black inmate also reflected on resilience and personal growth. The challenges he faced in the block mirrored many he had encountered before, requiring focus, adaptability, and mental strength. By applying discipline and strategic thinking, he had transformed a hostile environment into one where he could navigate safely and earn respect. The lessons extended beyond the prison walls, reinforcing principles that would serve him in life beyond this chapter. In the final days of his early time in the block, he was recognized quietly by others as a figure of calm authority. He had not sought confrontation for its own sake, but had responded with precision and discipline when necessary. His actions had reshaped the dynamics of the block, establishing him as someone who commanded respect through intelligence, observation, and controlled strength. He understood that challenges would continue to arise, but the foundation he had built ensured that he could face them effectively. The lessons of patience, strategic thinking, and measured action would guide him through future conflicts. He had earned a place in the block not by aggression, but by demonstrating that calm, disciplined authority was more powerful than loud domination. By the end of this part of the story, the black inmate had solidified his position in the prison. The bully had been humbled, the environment had shifted, and respect had been earned and maintained. His combination of patience, strategic observation, and controlled action had created a lasting impact. The block now operated under a new balance, one influenced by intelligence, discipline, and subtle leadership. He lay on his thin mattress at night, reflecting on how far he had come. From a cautious newcomer, he had become a respected figure, navigating challenges with skill and composure. The journey had reinforced the importance of patience, observation, and measured action. He understood that true strength was not just physical but also mental and strategic, and this understanding had transformed both his life and the environment around him. The lessons learned would remain with him long after the walls and gates, serving as a testament to resilience, intelligence, and the quiet power of disciplined action.